Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Mind of a Skeptical Leftist, the show where I promote critical thinking, social justice, and left-wing politics by covering current events and talking to a variety of people who know more than I do. Today, I'm joined by Buddy the Lumberjack from the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Good, Cory. How are you doing?
I'm good. I cannot say that I have been listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics. What are you guys covering lately?
I mean, up until the last few weeks, primarily politics. We talked a lot about the American election, which was going on. I don't know if you know that. That's been going on for I don't know how many years has this election cycle been?
7 or 8 years so far.
I've learned a lot more about American politics than I thought I knew, and
right.
It's incredible. But on the flip side, I've also get the chance. I'm the token Canadian now, so I get to kind of introduce Canadian topics, and I've had a lot of fun with that because obviously, for the most part, they're like, I mean, Canada's mostly like us, right? And I go, well, I mean, yeah, we've got horrible people. By the way, can I swear? Do you have an explicit tag? Oh, okay.
Don't worry about it.
I try to behave when I'm on other people's platforms because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to bring you down or if you're just going to lift me up a little bit. But yeah. So there's been the odd episode where I've just literally done explicitly Canada. One of my favorite episodes was the July 4th episode. One of the American hosts, Christopher Tanner, he's not a big fan of Independence Day. And so he said, I want that episode to be all Canada. So we outsourced listeners and various friends to say, hey, what's something you've wanted to know about Canada? And I came out with only a couple really good ones, but it still gave me almost 2 hours of really? Talking. And yeah, like wow. I said, it was just a handful of questions. And of course, in doing that, it's really helped me kind of learn a lot more about Canada and all of the aspects therein, because a lot of people have this romantic view of Canada as, oh, they're polite. They've got that handsome prime minister. And don't get me wrong, Trudeau, yeah, he's a handsome man. But yeah. As far as politics go, I'm still, not really sold. And the only reason I voted Liberal is because, federally speaking, that's the biggest way to not let the Conservatives win.
Which is, yeah, exactly the one thing we need to stop every time.
I mean, I believe in giving credit where credit's due. And I always laugh because I tell, the Chris's that their Conservatives can stop trickling into our politics because, I mean, at least Canadian Conservatives, it was under their rule that, we had the only female prime minister. It was Kim Campbell in 89. And I will caveat the crap out of that and say, yeah, okay, it was a couple of months. It was only because, her predecessor, I think he passed away or something. So she was really just more of an interim, but come on, Kamala Harris is going to be the first female vice president, right? So at least we can say we had somebody leading us that was a woman.
Yeah, that's right.
Marriage equality was even pushed through under the Conservative government. So our Conservatives, while doing terrible things, have at least done some good things. And now they're putting out people like Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer and Kenny. Sorry, saying his name makes me vomit.
That's fair.
For those who don't know, I live in Alberta, and if you know what's going on there, we're kind of the laughing stock of the country, and we're competing with a province whose premier, his brother, was famous for being the mayor that smoked crack, and we're the laughing stock. So it's kind of embarrassing to admit that I'm an Albertan right now. I kind of feel like the Americans who get Canadian memorabilia, so other people like me. I'm like, I'm Canadian. We're in Canada. I'm from the West.
Somewhere. Somewhere in Canada.
Far center.
I can always still say Saskatchewan because nobody has a fucking idea what that is.
That's true. I spent a year in Saskatoon one weekend, and that was it was different. I mean, I didn't hate the province. I think Alberta and Saskatchewan have a lot in common in terms of like our priorities and political bends, I guess. I'll admit, I'm not very familiar at all with Saskatchewan politics other than what I see you posting.
Similar to Alberta, we are pretty conservative in general, but our cities have a little bit more, liberal-ish, NDP-ish type people. And not good politics per se.
No. And it's so unfortunate too, because like you read or you take a look through history, and the people who support the conservatives most are primarily like rural, the farmer types.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, the conservatives are the ones who kept those people as a lower class of human being. Like I remember, the Great Courses has this amazing course called A Skeptic's Guide to American History. And hilariously enough, I started listening to it, and then I was listening to Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And Steve Novella, he mentioned that he was listening to that particular course and he thought it was great. And I'm like, oh, they're not related, but he's still promoting it. I'm listening to it, and it actually kind of checks out. And like, there was a lot of nuance that got missed, but in it, the teacher, of course, brought up how, farmers, being a farmer, although it's one of the most important professions, was always seen as just this low class individual. But now you see that group really being ramped up and taken advantage of by their, the conservatives who are telling them that, you just work hard because, like that's what you've been told to do. That's who you've been raised to be, and all of that. And it's just, it actually breaks my heart a lot to think about. Sorry, I got to take out my glasses a little here. I keep seeing that all you see is white on my glasses, and it's because I don't have a proper setup for the lighting here. You'd think somebody who does a live stream every week would know better by now. I do not.
That's all right. Yeah, no, it's like living among farmers and being being raised on a farm. Like, it does make me like I'm still never quite understand why the conservative message, like, I guess the messaging makes sense why it gets into the farmer's mindset, right? Why they believe in the messaging, but why they can't see through the messaging to the actions of the party as a pro-business, anti-small guy party. Like, I find it hard to understand why they can't see through that. It's not like farmers are dumb people. Like,
no, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. Like, in a battle of wits, no, I'm not going to bother going up against a farmer. No, thanks. They're very, very smart. You have to be, right. Like you work from sun up to sundown, day in, day out. I mean, if I had to hazard a guess, and I'm assuming that that's the game we're playing here. This is just going to hazard a guess. We're going to play a game called Wild Speculation.
Yes.
No, if I were to think that I suspect that it's because there has been a long-term goal, at least in Western society specifically, to kind of push to be better, and industrialization and commercialization have admittedly produced great things. It's helped rapidly advance technology and get that technology out to the people instead of just keeping it in just the super elite quarters. Not to say that super elite quarters are where the best of the best of the best is, because it is, but the public has better access to like technology and knowledge and all of that, and it's great. But I think it's just a long line of conditioning that's just built on conditioning, and it's almost like the well has been poisoned for so long that that now that's actually almost like a drug, and it's infiltrated our systems in such a way that now we kind of we need that, because like I'm a recovering conservative myself. You talked to Keith from 10 years ago, and I mean, I was kind of in the middle of questioning it, but I still leaned very, very more to the right, in trolling and edgelording and all of that garbage, because if you're not a dick in your early 20s, were you ever in your early 20s? That's what I'm going to stick with. But it's just that when all of a sudden you start to challenge it and go against it, it's like a withdrawal because of how strong the knee-jerk reaction is. And I mean, when I'm in a good enough mood that I can, maintain that almost Zen persona where it's just observing and experiencing and trying to find things out instead of reacting, it's enabled me to kind of see just like various little things, and it's like, hey, hang on, whoa, we got to stop there. What is this? And every day is like Christmas, where you're finding something new that's going on, and you're like, but how are these two things related? But I think in my little experiments, I guess, as you could say, I've kind of noticed that if you can stay away from buzzwords and you can focus more on values, you can usually find that people who identify as conservative aren't. I see a lot of this with my family, because the funny thing is that little did my parents, who are very anti anything but conservative, it raised me to be. A lot of the morals that they passed on to me, I'm sitting there, I'm like, you taught me this, but the guy that you're supporting and you're frothingly happy about, he's against that.
Yeah.
How is this making sense? As a kid, this is one of the few political memories that I have from being a kid, is there was a talk of privatization of healthcare, again under conservative rule.
Right.
And this was, for anybody who knows Alberta politics, the name Ralph Klein. I think he had the longest run as premier of Alberta. And apparently there was talk of introducing a private sector for healthcare. And I remember my mom sitting there and being like, well, they're explaining it to me, like, why is it fair that somebody can get the treatment that they don't necessarily need just because they can pay for it? And I was like, yeah, that's always stuck with me. And then as I got older and I started questioning things, I'm like, hey,
wait a sec,
they're selling us out here. His wife owns a private insurance company. Why isn't that bigger news? Why hasn't he been called to task? Oh, because he's conservative. We don't care. Questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You just end up asking questions after questions after questions, and then eventually they just stop.
Yeah, that's. I often talk about my interactions with my dad, because we argue about politics all the time. But one time, like you say, like we're discussing, say, billionaires, and we come down on the exact same side against billionaires, right? Like, yeah. And yet when he says, well, you're right here. And I was like, well, I mean, I didn't just come up with these values out of nowhere. I was raised to value like equal, people having the things they need, like not funneling the money up to the top. Like this is stuff that I was raised on in some sense. And somehow we ended up on separate opposite sides. Like, how does that happen?
Different sides of the aisle. Yeah. It is funny. So like you, my significant other is a person of color. My wife, she is first generation Canadian. Her parents were born in the Philippines and then immigrated here, and my wife and her brother were born here. So they were born Canadian citizens, but it's kind of interesting to see a lot. It's opened my eyes to a lot of different aspects of our culture, and just how the various little nuances of systemic racism going on and all of that. And it's also kind of given me a few minutes where I stop and I've looked at things I've heard my family say, and I'm like, ooh, that's not okay. And it's like, hey, so how you're all excited about the fact that you're gonna have kids that actually have a skin color other than pasty. Yeah, those kids, they're not going to be treated as white. You know that, right? They're probably going to be on the other end of those comments you're making. I'm actually kind of amazed. Right after, was it Charlottesburg? Was that where Charlottesville? Thank you. I did a whole statement about that. Like I wrote like a small essay. I was furious because I was seeing people who were standing by the whole, good people on both sides, and I'm like, okay, I've got to say some shit here. And I
Yeah.
was like, look, my kids aren't going to be white. I do not see one side as being the good guys because they killed people, or they killed someone who was saying, hey, people who aren't white have a right to live here too. They have a right to be treated as humans. And I flat out said, this is my children, my future children you are talking about when you talk about, or when you disparage anybody based on the color of their skin.
Yeah.
You might want to check yourself. I amazingly didn't really lose any friends after that, because I do have quite a few conservatives in my circles. So it's not that I hate conservatives. Some of my friends are,
Right. Yeah.
but
I've got a conservative friend.
yeah, now I kind of feel like it's so weird to say it like that, even though I'm just being lighthearted about it. It's like, I know there's
Yeah.
problems with those things too,
Yeah.
but
It's like, well, and I guess one can't for sure say that all conservatives are racist, but it feels like saying I've got a racist friend.
and you're absolutely right on that. Because you point out the racist support of conservatives, and they say, well, not all conservatives are racist. It's like, you're going to have to slow down on that one there, Geppetto, because you're supporting somebody who is actively putting forward policies that are, racist or sexist.
Yeah.
So you may not wish to identify as it, but you have to explain how you support it if you don't want to be labeled as such.
Yeah, that's right. Like, you can, like, I know many of the people I'm around that are conservative. I wouldn't necessarily call them all my conservative friends, but they often aren't. They are of the opinion that they are not racist, but then they will see a Black Lives Matter sticker on my car and say like, wow, do we really need to say Black Lives Matter? Like, oh, dude. I know you don't think you're racist. Yeah. I know you don't think you're racist, but we need we need to talk about this.
Yeah, and it's the politics. I've reached a point where, because I know where my family's coming from, maybe it's a little Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. They've got a lot of learning to do, and I've tried to figure out ways where I can try to educate them subtly. And I hate saying it like that because it really makes me feel like I'm manipulating them, but trying to introduce them to different ideas and ways of approaching things. Oh, that's a much better way of saying that. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
And I have to come back and copy this recording.
Yeah. You do have to be kind of subtle about it. Like, cause you can't just say like, dude, that's racist.
Yeah.
They'll get defensive. And I know my dad has even said things and then said that might make me sound racist. And I'm like, yeah, it does.
You're so close. You're like on the goal line. Come on. You got the touchdown in your grips. Come on.
So close.
Yeah, but yeah, like I found, I'm going to portray this a little bit here. I'm very much a carbon copy of my father. However, in terms of politics, I lean left. He says he leans further left, but he's staunchly right. He's got a lot of leftist tendencies, but he very much clings to a lot of right-wing conspiracy theories. And a lot of times once he gets going, I'm like, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to ignore this because it's just you and I in a room. And if I don't let you stop, or if I don't let you reach a natural stopping point, it's just going to hurt my head and I'm going to bleed out my eyeballs. So he's very, very anti-global warming and whatnot. We actually had this was a conversation he and I had where I felt like I actually kind of learned that, maybe if I tried the different non-buzzwordy approach, you might spur some critical thinking. And this was, we were talking something to do with Arctic ice, and how, like there was various amounts of sea ice versus land ice and all of that. And I'd actually read an article about the difference between the two and why, an increase of sea ice doesn't really mean squat if we're not seeing that ice year round, because he was kind of citing that. And I said, well, actually, what's going on there? And I explained to him, because, the ice coming off of the land there doesn't have the same salinity. It freezes quicker and easier than the ocean water. So that's why the sea ice, it's all the runoff, still looks like it's huge when in reality it's actually not. And he's like, oh, interesting. And carried on. And I was like, hang on. Something that you thought was a linchpin in your argument against global warming, and I just debunked it, and it didn't send you into a fit.
Right. Yeah.
Where are we?
It's the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, but it's and I mean, I realize that it's kind of making it sound like it's our duty to try to brew things down as far as possible. And if you have the ability to, if you are smart enough, because I'm definitely not.
Right.
If I were, I would be doing it more. If you're able to, and you have the patience, the time, and all of it, everything that it takes, absolutely go ahead. Like what's the Socratic method? Ask a lot of questions,
sure.
Try to get them to think about their answers and things like that. I'm sure if I spent more time watching street epistemology, I'd find a better way of explaining it. But I found that it's a better way to have conversations, and especially if you don't use the buzzards and you just kind of focus on the small little minutia of their arguments, and you can kind of stay on topic. Because if you get off topic, you're done. You're fucked. That's the conversation.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like I do find myself often saying to when my dad speaks, I'll say, well, I don't know if that's right. Or actually, I think I read something about this that's slightly different. Like, yeah, it doesn't always make a difference, but you do got to be sneaky about it a little bit.
Incredibly. Yeah. Yeah, it has been a bit of an adventure, and I got to admit, like, going much further left to a point where I'm just like, come on, like, can you not see the bullshit that's going on here? Like, pay attention to Alberta politics for 5 minutes, and you will sit there and like claw your eyes out because you're like, how do you people not see what's going on?
Apparently, a significant portion of the population do now see what's going on.
That's the problem with the first past the post system, which is our own weird variant of the Electoral College. And I mean, like, there's merits to it, but it's got to be revamped. Like,
oh yeah, that's right.
It does not work the way it should. I mean, although I did notice that it seemed fairly properly divided up amongst the votes in terms of like the Liberals and the Conservatives, who Conservatives actually came out ahead in the federal election anyways. It was the smaller parties that really got screwed over. And I mean, that does tend to happen because, they might have, 5-10% of the vote, but that's overall. And, they will have little pockets where, they've got a couple of seats, and then it's just not enough for them to really take hold. And it really bummed me out because I really I have a big crush on Jagmeet Singh. I'm not going to lie.
That's understandable.
That man is beautiful, and I very much wish to caress him if he would consent. I was actually really blown away because the other week he did a Twitch live stream with AOC. Right.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, they were playing Among Us, and I brought it up in one of our last recording. We didn't record this week because the guys are sick, and they decided no, it's more important to get better. And I said, you know what, you guys both have kids. I get that, makes sense. I spent a lot of time like watching him, his platforms, and I actually, so another thing that I've done with the podcast there, to circle back, is I also sat and for the first time in my life watched from beginning to end a federal leadership debate. And it was actually more interesting than I thought it would be. Rich, go figure.
You watched for the Conservatives?
Oh, you sound like Tanner now. Good thought. No.
No, that was not good.
Oh, Sheer is just he was an embarrassment. The only endearing moment of his, and I kind of figured him out real quick. He's basically like that kid in class that nobody actually likes, but nobody dislikes because he has his endearing moments. He's got that cheeky smile and that soft face that makes you think that okay, maybe he's not the total shithead, and then you talk to him and you go, oh no, you are worse than that.
Oh,
Because there was a moment where, and everybody knew it was coming, and I think that's probably why it got the reaction that it did. Was of course after they do their one question, have all the leaders discuss and everything. They gave a question to one of the leaders to ask another leader. Well, they gave it to Scheer, and everybody knew he was going to look at Trudeau, and he turned, put himself on his heel, spun 180 degrees, and planted himself down. And I'll give him credit because it was a funny moment. I laughed. I was like, oh God, here we go. And then, of course, watching him get eviscerated by Maxime Bernier, Scheer get eviscerated by Bernier, everybody's racist uncle, was hilarious. Yeah. I got through it all, and I'm just like, holy shit. And then right near the end, they were talking about reparations. And this was something that I really, really wish more Albertans paid attention to. Because Elizabeth May, who, although the Green Party will never really make waves in Canada, they might make a name for them in charity circles, in groups like that, which, that's we need that. Elizabeth May said something, and it stuck with me because Blanchard of the Bloc Québécois, he, on the topic of reparations, had suggested it be based off of provincial carbon emissions. And May responded to him and said, that's a nice idea, but that's not going to be fair to provinces like Alberta, because as we try to downsize the oil and gas or reliance on oil and gas, they're going to be hit economically the hardest, and that's not going to be fair to them. And I'm sitting there, like, I paused it, I rewound it, I don't even know how many times, and I'm just watching it, I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? Why are none of my neighbors noticing this? Like, yeah, okay, it's the Green Party, and we all think that they're pot smoking hippies who just want to run around in patchouli and hemp clothing that don't take showers and all of that. But if you listen to what she just said, like, she flat out said she doesn't think a reparation adjustment like that would be fair because she knows that our economy's hurting. Listen, the Conservatives aren't the only one who recognize this. The problem is the Conservatives are just trying to give you a quick, easy answer that's going to make you feel good now, whereas hers is going to, be better for you in the long haul. And that was just, it was just so devastating to me, because I'm like, somebody actually gives a damn about us, and all we can do is spit in their face.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty natural for the Conservative provinces. I'm not a Ralph Goodale stan in any sense, but he was our liberal mainstay in the province for forever. Mm-hmm. Years, and he's won his seat, and he's been our representative in the federal government for years. And then this time around, they just, they, like, the voters of our province said, you know what? We don't want any representatives in the federal government. We would rather vote entirely blue. And so Saskatchewan was 100% a blue province, according to the last federal election.
Oh, wow. Actually, I think I remember seeing that. I didn't realize it was that big of a shift, which goes to show how much attention I clearly pay. Because I know federally speaking, like even during Alberta's orange term, we still federally leaned hard on blue. And I was just like, oh man, can we just have a federal fracturing of the Conservatives like we did in Alberta just for a few years? It'd be nice to have that, peace and quiet. Although, who knows? I mean, Kenny's pissed off a lot of people, so he might be fracturing the Conservative vote again.
Yeah, I could see that.
Which, I mean, go for it. You know what? Yeah, I know you guys will pull rank and band together again, another 4 years later, but go for it. Just keep doing. Because I was laughing because a couple of weeks ago, of course, they were doing the address because Alberta's back in a lockdown. which we should have done from the beginning, but yeah.
Yeah.
Instead, it was more important to worry about the economy, which we could have worried about less had we not given away billions of dollars in tax incentives to companies that were just going to fire thousands of people and leave. But who saw that coming?
Yeah.
And reading the comments,
just
course,
everybody who wasn't a conservative.
Yeah, which was probably more than half of the province, but they just didn't get out and vote. In the comments, of course, you've got, the average people who are just, kind of sitting there saying, oh, we got the NDP trolls, blah, blah, blah. And we should, we got to focus on the economy and the usual grumblings, which is really just nonsensical or irrelevant to any sort of progress or point. And then, of course, you get the really interesting folks. They're my favorites to watch because they come out and they be like, this is communism. And I'm like, no.
Wait a sec. Yeah.
You use this word, but it does not mean what you think it means. Yeah. And sometimes being a fly on the wall for comment sections is less painful than being involved in the comment sections, because if there is a hell, it is the comment section.
Yeah.
There are times where just taking sandpaper to your eyeball is going to be better for you in the long run. And I was reading another comment thread where this one person who claimed to be a teacher of all things was saying, this is catering to socialism and blah, blah, blah. And this is how we let the socialists win. And I'm like, not even remotely close. You're claiming you're a teacher, and somebody called her out and she goes, yeah, that's, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm a teacher. I have been for decades. And I'm like, I'm reading this thread and I'm not seeing a lot of proof that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know just because my wife's a teacher doesn't mean that I know what every teacher's like, because we know that there are some really weird teachers, we'll say. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, are you like in those religious charter schools? Is that where you're a teacher? Because I have a feeling that not even the Calgary Catholic School District would be okay with somebody like you doing that.
One of those anti-teachers union teachers.
Yeah. Yeah, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I have issues with some of the policies in place by the union, just based off of what my wife has told me she goes through. And
sure.
I have my issues, and as somebody who was a member of a union for 11 years, I do have issues with the way unions are run these days. I'm pro-union. I'm just not pro-modern union, the corporatization of unions, right?
It is a problem when a union is run like this. Is why you get wildcat strikes, right? Like, because the union isn't necessarily always representing the workers.
Yeah, and
but
it's like I said, like there's good sides to unions. Like the one that I was with for 11 years, like I was making pretty decent money. I had put myself into a position where I could have stuck around for a couple more years. I could have even been, moved up a bit. But it was a job that I hated. And it was crap work, and I wanted out, although my out was not a great idea, but you live and learn, right? And, in my time with the union, I did see the good. Again, decent pay. I had benefits. I had dental coverage. I mean, like when you're 18, you don't really think about that unless you're weird. And like for me, like because I was a student, I was covered under my mom's dental plan, my dad's dental plan, and then my own. So I always joked every time I went into my dentist office, I was like, okay, after you run my 3 coverages, how much do you guys owe me?
Yeah.
Thankfully, my dentist office has a great sense of humor, or they just have come to expect things like that from me, and they just kind of laughed it off. It was great, and I had vacation pay. Like I actually had an increase in vacation allotment. So I'm not sure if there's a standard in Saskatchewan. I know here it's like 4% of your income if your employer wants. They can either pay you outright, or they can bank time and you can just take it as you go.
Yeah, we get the equivalent, like we used to always say it was 350 seconds. Like you get the equivalent of 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that works out to, divided by whatever you work, that's what you get.
6%-ish. Okay, so standard for us is 4. Well, I was up to because of the union, I was up to 8. So that was basically 8 full weeks paid.
Right.
And that would have been great, but then I saw them turn around and and one day they, out of nowhere, with no announcements, there was a vote to increase union dues, and they used every loophole in the book to make it as inconvenient of a time as they could legally get away with without getting in trouble. And I threw that back in their faces during one of our contract votes. As I handed in my vote, the lady, she goes, "You didn't want to stick around and hear?" And I said, "Oh, the union that didn't give me an opportunity to vote on their increase of their dues, I shouldn't trust them." And she just kind of looked at me slack-jawed, and again, shithead, edgy 21 or early 20s. And she was just kind of and I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was more anti-union then, but I enjoyed my perks. And then, of course, kind of grew up a little bit and realized that, those perks kind of, they did
Came
help.
from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And looking more deeper into unions, it did kind of help me understand that, unions are the reason for a lot of labor laws that we have in practice today. And it's very important to remember that. Now, I have seen refutation that the 40-hour work week wasn't designed to keep it so you couldn't pursue anything else, but rather that it was studied and determined to be the best way to, or most efficient, I guess, way to schedule employees, at least at the time. And
right now, I think even if people work 8 hours at the average job they spend, I think it's 3 of them not working.
I mean, I know my coworkers. Yeah, some of them.
Yeah. And the longer your shift, the less time, less percentage of it you work. Like at a 12-hour shift, you spend less time at actually doing work than you do it during an 8-hour, percentage-wise.
That's possible. I mean, I might be a little biased in my own experience, just because my bosses really don't let me have overtime unless it's needed.
Right.
Which, I mean, it's a good thing. They say, you go home, you're not getting paid extra. Okay, bye. I don't work extra if I'm not getting paid extra. Come on now, I know my worth.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm worth more than what you guys already pay me, but I at least know that much.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
that was that was one of those things that when I was at my 12-hour-a-day job, I mean, I actually spent a lot of time not working because there wasn't something going on, but I just had to be there to babysit the facility, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has to be there in case something happens.
Well, I mean, technically that is working. You're supervising.
Sort of. Yeah, that's right.
It's a different type of work. Well, it's just kind of funny because I very much have the blue collar mentality where I need to work. If I'm at work, I need to be moving. I need to be productive. I have to be contributing. And ironically enough, for the blue collar mentality, it's I have to be there to, because if I'm not there for my team, then the rest of my team suffers, which is kind of hilarious when blue collar workers think of things in that, and then they go and support the conservative ideologies of it's all about you, it's all about me, and I got promoted to a ship's more of a supervisor role. So it used to be that I would go in and I would spend my 8 hours doing my job, and I could measure how much work I did. And then, of course, I moved up, and now my work isn't really measured like that. Right. And now it's kind of a lot more of a gray area. And so there are days where I stay an extra half hour because it's I don't feel like I did anything to deserve what I got paid to do. Crap. And so there are times where even with my boss passes by and I don't think I'm looking at the right screens, I quickly switch my monitors. I'm look at my graphs, look at my graphs. Just because I'm kind of I can't show you everything that I've done. A lot of it's been really abstract and in my head. And so it's, you got to learn to, give yourself that leeway. And I don't know, maybe that's just part of the problem with the corporate world, is that the higher up you get, the more you have to create that gray area to justify being in that gray area, which is a weird vicious circle to think about.
Yeah, that's right.
And you gotta get past that anxiety of, feeling like you have to be productive.
Well, yeah, there's different versions of production too, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a productive in a creative way, or like a idea sense, or there's creative in like, I can show you the material that I have produced sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, and I mean, at my old job, we ran pumps and we pumped water away.
Mhm.
Right. So to be productive in that, I mean, if there's no water, you're very limited in what you can produce as an employee.
Right.
But
yeah. And absolutely. And I mean, I've worked a lot of different jobs, come to think of it, in the last few years. I think the one that really for me was like just the worst in terms of that mentality shift was when I was working sales. Because of course, like, I come from a very, very, very much like, I don't like salespeople to begin with. I don't like the pushy sales tactics. I may have mentioned this last time we spoke in your old show. I have a degree in psychology, so I understand a little bit of social psychology enough to kind of pick up on subtle little tactics that salespeople will use to try to prompt you to buy. And I very much see that as, manipulation and deliberate coercion. So morally speaking, like, I won't, because I'm like, no, that to me feels like I'm seeing no and trying to argue against it, and I have issue with that. The whole idea of last minute resistance or whatever, and pushing through resistance.
Consent means in every set way.
Exactly. And there were times where I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the guys who are trying to teach me these sales techniques, and I'm just like, you do know no means no, right? Like, if you're out on a date and she says, no, you can't stick your finger there, you're not allowed.
You don't get to
sit
like,
there
yeah,
and try to argue that you should be allowed to. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know that I have been that shithead, and I have tried to apologize to atone for that, because I recognize that that's a shitty behavior. But do you realize that that's kind of pushy and creepy and gross and wrong, and there's a reason why people don't like you? Did you know that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And just being pushed and being told that, well, you're not selling enough. I'm like, okay, but like, I'm also, understanding that no means no. I'm making the soft sale, and I'm helping them get a better, more informed choice. They'll come back to me more in the long term if they trust me than if they feel like I'm just trying to force them into buying something. And so, of course, I butted heads with those supervisors a lot.
Right.
And now I'm back in the corporate world, and it's back to, like, less sales and more of just, managing things and doing specific tasks. Because, like I said, I am more task driven, and I think that's kind of trademark of the standard blue collar worker, is to, have an outline, right?
Yeah. You give me a job to do, it'll get done.
And I guess that kind of makes me want to springboard off to a discussion you kind of brought up on your Facebook the other day about small businesses and exploitation.
Right.
Just because I typed out like 3 different essays trying to figure out how to respond to that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to talk to them in a couple of days. Maybe I'll see if I can then. And now apparently I'm just going to bull in a China shop my way onto that one. Because I have done the small business work. Like my last job, I was working with a delivery company that had like 5 employees total. It was a husband and wife were the owners. It was his daughter from his first marriage was like the dispatcher. And then, I guess there's 6 of us. And then there's myself, my coworker, who we were the main crew for deliveries, setup, and everything. And then there was a third employee who was primary service. And it was a very different environment because, like, as you know, like when you're working with a big company, like the exploitation comes in. I kept trying to argue that it was coming in a different form, and I couldn't get the words right. So the biggest difference is that, like, when you're working in that big corporation, you've got that person from the top pushing down to try to, increase efficiency, make things run better, make things run smoother. And if you look at the motivations behind that, usually that's just because they get a bigger kickback at the end of it. They, like, things are already really cushy for them. They're just being greedy and they want more. They're just trying to increase their own cushion, their own luxury. but when I was working with the small company, like they had pretty modest house. Her summer car was a Pontiac Solstice.
Nice.
She loved that car. Like she would drive it with the top down. It was yellow, and she was like, I just love this. I'm like, I mean, I don't get it, but it makes you happy, and that's awesome. That's what matters.
There you go. Yeah.
And like he had owned a drywalling business, had actually retired, and just went back to work because she was driving him nuts, as he explained it to me, anyways. And
okay.
For them, like the trying to get you to work a little harder, work a little more, put a little extra effort. It was just because they don't always have the expendable income of the company. They don't have access to the same resources. Right. And one thing that I was circulating around was like in a big company, they have the capital to order more resources at once, which means they can get a bigger discount. Well, that discount is only available if you're buying in those quantities. If you just need the smaller quantities, you're paying more per price per unit. And this was something that I learned in the grocery store is usually buying the bigger item, it is actually a better deal simply for the fact. I mean, if you're not going to go through the whole thing and it's going to go bad before you finish it, then obviously, you can
right. But if it's something you can, yeah.
I'm not the teacher. That's my wife. You do your own math. And for them, it was, just trying to make the most of what they had because they weren't sure if they'd be able to get the next step without, like cutting into somebody else's pay or shorting the company or whatever. So yes, exploitation, absolutely a thing. But there's a different intention behind it. And I know a lot of people don't. I know a lot of people, they don't like seeing the intention, and I understand that. And if you don't want to, you can feel free to just put your fingers in your ears, go la 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 until I'm done. I don't know, I'll be another minute or two here. And it's at the big end, it's just sheer greed. But at the smaller end, it is more about sustainability and trying to maintain a continuing business, because it is a small business. You don't necessarily have all the resources and all of the abilities to provide for your employees, because you can't take advantage of all of the big tax loopholes either, because you just can't afford them.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing that drives me nuts, is people going, well, anybody can do it. So, nah.
Yeah, no, not anybody. But no, you're right. There are different motivations per se, but I think that it still needs to be acknowledged, right? Like, somebody on my comment on my post commented, it seems like a weird argument to say that corporate exploitation and small business exploitation are equal. And I wouldn't argue that they're equal. Nike has had child labor. Coca-Cola has started wars. These are things that you don't get from your local business owner. Yeah. But quite often, a local or small business owner, and I guess I can to an extent speak to this from personal experience, because I did work for a big oil company. And then I was bought out. Our facility was bought out by a much smaller company. And as a result, they cut staff naturally, because they can't afford it. But that means that the workload is distributed. The same workload is distributed among fewer people.
Yeah.
And then they are more inclined to expect you to do things that are out of your normal wheelhouse. It's easy for you to, like at my job, it was easy for me to get used to the facility that I was working at. Right. But because they didn't need as much staff there, and they had already got rid of staff they didn't like at the other facility, I got moved to the other facility. Right. And then they cut back on your overtime, and then they cut back on your benefits, and you don't have a quote unquote pension plan, stuff like that. Like, so in the end, you're not getting as much value out of your labor as you were before, even though before you were feeding a corporate system that's inherently corrupt and greed driven and awful on many, many levels. but to the individual worker, you're actually losing more by being employed by a smaller employer than you were.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's not equal, but it's not without exploitation.
Oh, most definitely. And I mean, like I won't. I hope I don't romanticize my former employment, because I did have a lot of issues. There are reasons why I did not work, or why I stopped working there, and one of the biggest reasons. So what I was doing, just to kind of put into perspective, is I was installing and delivering fitness equipment for a company that used this small company as a contractor for their to do their deliveries, because it was cheaper for them to outsource it and have somebody else take care of it for liability's sake and all of that, which is a whole other lot of issues and discussions, especially at my new job. Oh God. And so of course, again, smaller company trying to keep costs low. They didn't provide benefits. Well, now I don't know how familiar people are with carrying treadmills. The average house treadmill, I would say, like the base, so you've got your motor and then the board and all of that, you're looking at about 2 to 250 pounds for the average one. A light one will be like 150 pounds. And the heaviest one in residential, at least when I worked there, was about 400 pounds. And part of the reason why they wanted me on the crew is because they knew I could deadlift 400 pounds. So they're like, you can carry a 400-pound treadmill, or at least the heavy end of the 400-pound treadmill. We need somebody like you. And I'm like, okay, good. I will work harder, as Boxer would say. And
I lift things up and I put them down.
Yeah, that's kind of my mantra. And but one day I had woken up, and like I've of course, through my time doing a lot of weightlifting, I have learned that I can hurt my back if I'm not careful. And of course, and yeah, I mean, now I'm in my 30s, so I'm a little more inclined to be careful, but in my 20s, not so much. Well, about 3 months before I decided it was time to stop working there, I was walking up to a house, and this was May, and it was snowing in May.
Because it's Canada.
Canada, yeah, that too. And I happened to hit a patch of ice, and I knew my back was a little tender, but I knew how to move in such a way that I wouldn't hurt myself doing anything. Well, this threw a literal wrench into my plans, because as we're walking, one foot hit an ice patch and went that way. And I managed to keep myself upright and not fall over, because my poor coworker, he was like 6-7 inches shorter than me, and I don't think he could have got there in time to catch me. And I kept myself up, but I could tell that I had tweaked something, and I was like, oh crap. And then finished up that job, went to the last job, parked the truck, got home, woke up the next morning, and I go to put on my socks, and I mean, I'm 6'2", so yeah, okay. Putting my socks on can be a little bit of a task, because I got a lot of distance to travel. And standing up, I tried to do the flamingo thing. Well, I got 3 inches down, grunted, because all of a sudden my entire back seized. And I'm like, ooh! And I'm like, oh, this is good. Okay. Laid down for a few minutes, got up a little bit later, and my wife and I went and did our errands, and I got home, and I'm like, oh, I'm not working for a few days. Called up my boss, and I said, yeah, so you remember how I was a little stiff the other day? Well, yeah, no, I'm really stiff now, and I'm not working for the next few days. And it was in those few days that, of course, it all kind of came to light, because I was like, okay, this is 2 days now that I'm not working. So that's 2 days of pay that I'm down. I don't have benefits, so I have to try to find a cheap massage therapist. And fortunately, a friend of mine who was doing her student rates, because she was doing her interim, was available and got me in right away, and was an immense help. And I think she enjoyed the fact that, yeah, I may be, a gym monkey, but I'm also aware that massage brings pain, because I lived with a massage therapist for years. So she was like, I'm not used to being able to get this rough with people. Normally people, when I do something like this, and she just dug her thumb into my calf, and she's like, normally when I do something like that, they like cry. And I looked at her and I was like, I was born into pain. Come on, do your worst. Also, I know it's going to feel a lot better, because as soon as your thumb's out of there, endorphins are going there, and it's going to feel fantastic. And so finally, after a couple of days, got my back patched up, and I'm like, had I not been able to recover from that, I would no longer be able to work. I would not have coverage for any sort of workers' compensation or whatever. Small company that really didn't pay into a lot of that. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, my God, I am 30 years old. I could have ruined my life. So then I decided to get an office job. But you know, it's the fact that I was working, and I mean, partially, yeah, it was my own dumbass fault. I knew I probably shouldn't have been, but I did anyways. And then, you know, but recognizing that, I was just like, you know, I work really hard, and I think I need to ease up a little bit and not do this whole, you know, acting like I'm in my early 20s, because I'm not in my early 20s anymore. Those days are gone.
Yeah. And the older you get, the worse it gets.
Oh, I know. Like they say, you know, you're supposed to get like 8 hours of sleep. I find that if I get 8 hours or more of sleep, I wake up and my back is sore, and I'm like, oh, come on, man. I slept enough. Now I got to deal with this. Like, come on.
That's when I feel the best, is right after that sleep. But I only usually get 5.5 to 6 hours, no matter what I do. So,
yeah, I know that feeling. And you know, like, there's no real aches and pains after that. But yeah, no, it's as you get older, it's just. And so I kind of wonder, like, you see the guys who are like doing these hard physical labor jobs for, you know, their entire career, and you wonder, like, how did you not die?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on some level you get used to it, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Like, even at my job, like, we had to pull pipe and like pull wrenches and put in pipes, and we lifted a lot of heavy stuff too. And it is the kind of thing where you get used to doing it the right way.
Yeah.
So then you don't injure yourself. And then sometimes you do it wrong, and you remember why you do it the right way.
Yeah, no kidding. It also kind of makes me wonder, you know, like, can a person literally be held together with nothing more than sheer spite and determination?
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It's no longer mind over matter. It's mind become matter, or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The frustration at your job built muscle.
Yeah, combine old man strength with sheer desire to just prove somebody wrong.
Yeah, that's right. That's all you get this time around, folks. The rest of the episode will be for patrons only. This was quite a long discussion, and I just wanted to put out only about an hour for consumption for the main feed. It just makes a little bit more sense. For patrons, though, you will get the full interview, including counter propaganda and comrades and foes, or what we did for it. And yeah, if you want to get that, patreon.com/skepticalleftist. That's all, folks. Thanks for listening, and remember to share the episode with your friends and on the social medias. Post it in Facebook groups, send it on WhatsApp, and basically annoy the hell out of everyone you know by letting them know how good this show is and how much they should listen to it. Thank you to everyone who supports this show on Patreon. I have 17 supporters who contribute $1 or more each month, and that makes it so I can spend more time working on this show and the other shows I produce to bring you the highest quality content that I can. If you want to contribute, you can do that at patreon.com/skepticalleftist. Or you can send me money on PayPal at paypal.me/brainstormpodcast. If you can't contribute financially, then a 5-star rating and a review on your podcast app of choice, or one of the podcast review sites like Podchaser, would be great. If you want to find more from me, then you make sure to check out my Linktree at linktree/skepticalcory. You can find all my social media stuff there, as well as links to my other shows, which include Skeptarchy, From Many People's Strength, and The Feminist Family. My Twitter is @hardcoreskeptic, and my Facebook page is The Mind of a Skeptical Leftist, or you can send me a friend request at facebook.com/cjbrainstorm. Thanks again for listening, and have a good one.